2026, the annual event of 𝗠·nomics, the Analytics and Economics Club of the Department of Business Economics, University of Delhi. I, 𝗦𝗶𝗵𝗵, the coordinator at 𝗠·nomics, would like to take this opportunity to introduce you all to the theme of our panel, the dream of Viksit Bharat in the era of global uncertainty and climate risk. Our theme explores India's path towards its 2047 vision, where the pursuit of sustained economic growth increasingly intersects with the imperative of ecological preservation. As global uncertainty, trade volatility, and climate risk reshape economic priorities, the challenge lies in designing policies that are both resilient and sustainable. Join us as we navigate these complex trade-offs and reflect on the strategies that can enable inclusive, future-ready developments for India. Today, we have the honor of hosting a distinguished personality amongst us who embodies the essence of our theme. It is a moment of immense pride and honor for all of us to welcome our chief guest and keynote speaker, Dr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia sir, one of India's most distinguished economists and policy architects, a former deputy chairman of the Planning Commission, holding cabinet rank. Dr. Ahluwalia played a defining role in shaping India's development strategy during the UPA years. He has also served as Finance Secretary and Secretary, Department of Economic Affairs in the Ministry of Finance, working closely with Dr. Manmohan Singh during the landmark 1991 economic reforms and later during his tenure as the Prime Minister. An eminent academician and policy thinker, he has authored influential research and contributed extensively to India's macroeconomic and reform disclosure. In recognition of his exceptional contributions to the economic policy, he has been awarded the 𝗏𝗵𝗵𝗵, India's second highest civilian honor. A proud alumnus of University of Delhi, his journey from these very halls to the highest levels of policy making is a profound inspiration for all of us. We deeply are privileged to learn from his wisdom as we begin Arthniti 2026. The Department of Business Economics would like to extend a very warm welcome to our keynote speaker and our respected faculty. With this, the stage is all yours, sir.
Faculty for inviting me to inaugurate this session of Arthniti. It's always a bit frightening to talk to a group of graduate students because you know that they know more than you do and they've read a lot more than you have. But anyway, I welcome the opportunity to share some thoughts. I've been asked to talk about Viksit Bharat and what are the problems of getting there and so on. So and I believe there's going to be some questions. In fact, that's what I really enjoy. So I see that it's now about 10:26. So I'll speak for about maybe 25 minutes, hopefully, and then throw it open for questions. So I won't go into what I'm saying in detail, but just say a few things to stimulate you. So, Viksit Bharat. What is Viksit Bharat? Traditionally, people have always viewed development as being, if you had to choose one measure, just one, you would choose GDP. But I think everybody knows that GDP is not everything. For example, you can achieve a very high level of GDP because one small part of the country discovers a lot of resources and all the income from those resources accrue to a handful of people and maybe to some of the labor in that area, and therefore the country's GDP goes up, but the rest of the country remains exactly where it is. So I think people know that it's not just GDP. The GDP ought to be reasonably broadly distributed. Some audience, and you say that the GDP has grown in the last 5 years at, say, 6% or 7% per year. you have a feeling that everybody must be feeling that they've also grown, their income has grown at 7% or 8%. Now it may not be 7, some people's growth is only 4, and other 4 or 5, others maybe a little more, but everybody's growing. You don't expect to take any great pride in saying 7% growth in an audience of 10,000 people in a rally if only 1,000 of them have actually benefited. And the other 9,000 say to themselves, where's the growth? I'm not experiencing it. So there's an element of distribution which is built into the concept of GDP. And that distribution just means that you can't be proud of GDP growing if you're not ensuring that there's a reasonable spread of benefits. Now that's about income. But you know, welfare is not just about income. Welfare is also the delivery of public goods. And public goods are not things that you get because you have high income. They're things which the system delivers to you. You may or may not be paying for it. I mean, sometimes it might be free, like school education. In university education, for states universities, you may be paying something, but not very much. Similarly, in the case of clean drinking water, you may be paying for it, although very little. Similarly, in the case of safety and security and police services, you're not paying. I mean, you're paying through taxes, but you don't pay for it directly. So I think what people expect is that along with the growth of GDP, there should be an improvement in the quality of public services. And that's a separate mechanism. It's perfectly possible to have a situation where GDP is growing, business is growing, everybody is making money, but you know, law and order is deteriorated. And that nobody really can be sure when you're walking down the street that some local thug will not sort of hit you on the head and run away with your money. That kind of society is of no use. People expect that you should have security of life and property and so on. So, you know, you can expand the GDP notion to include all these things. And then basically, it's very clear that from the point of view of the government or whatever, whoever is thinking of the country, you have to measure whether it is a well-distributed growth of GDP or not. Now, at our level of income, income is so low, even today. I mean, when we started the 91 reforms, we were what the World Bank calls the low-income country. Since then, we've climbed up the ladder, and we're now at the bottom of the middle-income country level. You know, I forget the numbers, but our rank, if you go by per capita income, is about 160th in the world. If you look at per capita incomes, if you look at total income, because our population is very large, our GDP may well soon become the 4th largest, and a few years later will become the 3rd largest. That has some relevance because it talks about the size of the market, but it's not the same thing as being a rich country. So I think the current thinking is that there is our per capita income level is maybe just below $3,000. The concept is that you really need to be something of the order of $13,000 plus to get out of the middle income level and into what is called the bottom of the low income level. So that means that really we need to have an increase in our per capita income almost 5 times, a little less than 5 times from what it is today, in order to achieve Viksit Bharat, defined as the group of countries that the World Bank calls at a level which you can say is beyond the middle income level. Okay? Now that's not easy to get, but it's not impossible either. So if you translate that into GDP growth, what it really means is the GDP growth in real terms should be 8%. And of course, it should also be reasonably well distributed. Well distributed means rich and poor, also regional. You know, you can have a situation where the GDP growth is regionally very badly distributed, but a lot of the poorer people are really benefiting. Politically, even that would not be acceptable. So you need to be able to address people and be able to say that whether you're rich or poor, your GDP has been growing satisfactorily, and also whether you're a rich state or a poor state, your GDP has been growing. Although the expectation in the States is that if I'm a poor state, I should catch up with richer states. But of course, some states which are rich kind of go down, so there'll be a little bit of balancing. So one question would be, are we on track for that kind of GDP growth? Well, if you just look at GDP, then probably the average growth rate of GDP in the last few years, if you take it all together, it's about 6.5%. I mean, at any one quarter it may have gone up, but I'm doing an average. And probably that's, if you look at the whole period from the 91 reforms onwards, the economy has been growing something like 6.5%. In certain periods, the growth rate shot up, in certain periods shot down, but 6.5 is where the average so far. So now one view would be that, look, we're growing at 6.5. In order to become Viksit Bharat, we need to add 1.5 percentage points to the growth rate. Now, interestingly, the effect of the economic reforms of 91, which were mentioned earlier, they were really a very key break in India's performance, was to raise the growth rate from 5 to 6.5. So all these wonderful reforms, not just what was done in 91, but also the continuation of those reforms. Because I think one of the strengths of the Indian system has been that although we are politically very noisy, and politically, I mean, that's what a democracy is. Opposition always says the government is doing the wrong thing. Government blames your opposition. So there's a bit of a ding-dong battle at the political arena. But by and large, the reforms have been sort of endorsed. One of the reasons people are happy to say 91 reforms are good is because 91 is a long time ago. During 91, no, the opposition was not saying they're good. So opposition at any given time will not like what is happening. That's their job. But I think all said and done, if you need to, this is what people think, that if you need to get from 6.5 to 8, merely continuing with what is happening, a little bit of reforms carrying on is not enough. You need a break, a 1.5 percentage points break, which is actually pretty similar to what the 91 reforms did at that time for the steady state growth rate. Okay? So that's why people say we need another 1991. And I think that's true. But it's a little more complicated than that. And I think, let me just explain why I think it's a little more complicated. See, first of all, as you grow, there's a natural tendency that the growth rate will fall. Because, you know, when you become a developed country, you're going to grow at the growth rate of developed countries, which is about 3%. China is already seeing that happening, because China has shot up for a long time, and now it's slowed down. So if India is to grow at an average of, say, 8% from now to 2047, then in a reference context, you should assume that what we need to do is to grow at about 9% for the next 10 years, and then prepare for a slowing down to an average of 7. I mean, the slowdown will be more gradual, but you must allow for the fact that a slowdown is natural. So what is the gap between our current performance and what it should be is not the gap between this performance and the 25-year growth rate for the future. It should be the gap between the current performance and what should be the performance, let's say, for the next 10 years. And that's higher than 8%. So that's quite a big thing. Now, the current situation is that everybody's agreed. The government has certainly agreed, and the Prime Minister has often said so, that what is going on is not by itself enough. In order to achieve Viksit Bharat, we have to, I think the phrase that PM is keen on is, reform, perform, transform. So that means that he also feels that, look, this is fine, but you've got to do more. Now the question is, what is that more? That's really what all of you, and by the way, this matters to you much more than to me, because at age 82, I'm not going to be around for Viksit Bharat. So we've done our bit. But if you're serious about the economy getting where you want to be, this is what you should be focusing on. When you meet your MPs and whatever your people who want to be MPs, the question you should ask them is, tell me, what reforms are you doing that will take our GDP growth from 6.5% to 9%. Now, it's sad to say that the political debate doesn't focus on that at all. The political debate focuses on what are you doing for me now? For me or my caste or my region or whatever. Nobody is asking the question, what are you doing to bring the growth rate to 9.5%? That may be talked about in New Delhi and so on, in Davos and what have you. But at the lowest level of the political discourse, that's not where the pressure is. Sad point is that the pressure is not even. Viksit Bharat to choro, but what are you doing about clean water? What are you doing about clean air? These things every now and then get talked about in the newspapers. For example, in Delhi, as you know, the pollution count spikes in the winter. And if you draw a graph of the AQI using PM2.5 as the criterion, the graph shows a huge peak in January, then it goes down, remains down, and then peaks again. When I say down, it doesn't go to normal. When it's down, it's well above international standards. But it's not a peak. And if you look at the public concern about pollution, it's only during the peaks. And to my mind, all of you are, hopefully, as you get married and have children, think of your children's interest. The people who are most affected by bad pollution, bad air, are kids, because their lungs have yet to develop. And lots of scientific evidence that suggests that if kids grow up in a polluted atmosphere, that development of the lungs doesn't actually take place the way it should. And other studies show that continuing to live in a polluted atmosphere knocks out life expectancy by almost 8 years. Now, if that is the case, and that's a public good, that's not the result of getting the market to function better. In fact, a lot of what you do for the market causes the pollution in the first place. I don't find that is reflected in the way our politics pushes things forward. Similarly for water. You just saw the stories about water supply in Indore, etc. It's one of those things that the deterioration in quality of public services hits the news every now and then, but it's not always present. So there's nobody in politics on any party who is saying, look, I don't care about Viksit Bharat or somebody will do that, but I'm really concerned, I must make sure that Delhi becomes unpolluted, and similarly MPs in other cities. Or say, I'm just concerned about making water really clean. These are the international standards, these are the national standards. National standards are not as good as international standards, and our level of performance is even lower. So, in the next 5 years, I'm going to get back to national standard. And when I come back to seek election, I'm going to provide data that this is what I said and this is what we've achieved. I've not heard any political presentation on that. Now, I don't know the answer to that, but I think we cannot, in a democracy, you cannot expect these kinds of things to happen unless they become a political demand. So all of you have to think about when you go to a political meeting and you're listening to someone saying, listen, vote for me, you should ask them this question: what do you want to do about clean water? To be honest with you, I don't blame the politicians at all. Because look, the politicians are in a market, and it's the market for votes. And today the market for votes is, you want to be able to say, what freebie have you given either to the people as a whole, or to particular sections of the people that you are appealing to, or to particular castes, because that's how votes are collected. So I think we have a serious the political market is failing seriously, because it's not conveying these signals. So, Viksit Bharat, got to have high growth, you've got to have a good supply of public goods, and these public goods are not supplied by the central government. They're all supplied by state government entities. So if you feel that you're not getting a good law and order situation, your property, life, particularly for women, lots of concerns on safety. I mean, there's no point asking the central government what are you going to do about it, because the police and all this are all state government matters. And I think that's really where the action needs to be done. Okay, one other question. You know, there's a tendency to think that this is what we did in '91 and we must now bring those notebooks out and see what we should do in 2026. This is wrong. It's wrong because the world has changed, the economy has changed. The kind of problems that we were able to handle, I mean, I'm very pleased that I was part of a team that handled it. They did tear up the recipe that was inherited from the past and said, no, this is all crap, we have to do things differently. We didn't say that, by the way. And I feel I regret. Because in those days, Mr. Narasimha was heading a coalition which was a coalition led by the Congress Party. If he were totally honest, and for that matter, if Manmohan Singh were totally honest, what they would have said is, listen, we have evolved over the last 20 years, not from the days of Panditji, that was post-independence, we didn't do so badly. But really from 1970 onwards, the economy has been going downhill, and we're tearing up what we thought, what was then said to be good policies, and producing new ones. Now, if there had been a different party, they might have done that. But the same party doing sensible things, you don't do that. You say, we have always improved over time, blah, blah. So 90% of the Congress party in '91 were basically persuaded that what we are doing is a continuation of the past. And there was supposed to be great merit in continuing. Whereas the factual position is, we tore up the workbook. And I wish we had, including me, I wish we had been able to say that. Because then people would have got more used to the idea that just because you're doing what you did 20 years ago is not necessarily a good thing. And that's very true now, because the situation today is not what it was in 1991. In 1991, the world was moving quite happily into a much more market-dominated world. India was one of the 3 most controlled societies outside the communist world, okay? And therefore it was very easy to say that, look, wake up and smell the coffee. I mean, this is not the right thing to do. And I think we should be grateful to Mr. Narasimha Rao and Dr. Manmohan Singh that they had the vision to actually change. I've written about this in my own memoirs, and I think it's quite well known now, that when Narasimha Rao told Manmohan Singh that, look, we've got a huge crisis and money's all run out and I want you to be finance minister, Manmohan Singh said to him that, look, I'm very happy to come, but I'll have to do things which will be politically very difficult for you. And Manmohan Singh and Narasimha Rao said to Manmohan that, look, you do what you have to do, I will take care of the politics. And then he added, if you succeed, we'll share the credit. If you fail, you'll get the blame. And that's a perfectly reasonable approach, you know, to say, okay, I'm giving you the cover, now you get it done. Now, I think the problem is at that time, I'm not trying to minimize in any way Dr. Manmohan Singh's achievement, and I've been very, I mean, I'm a major beneficiary of his. But the fact of the matter is, it was very simple. If you looked around, we were the only guys doing these ridiculous controls. Everybody else had moved to a market economy. Even the communist countries of Europe had done that, and the Soviet Union was about to break up. It broke up 6 months after our reforms. Today, you cannot get up and say, look, these guys are doing very well, let's follow them. Because the fact is, the world is in a mess. The President of the United States has been described by many people as taking a wrecking ball through the global consensus on how the world should be run. And he's quite proud of it. He thinks it was run badly. He wants to do it differently. Everybody is worried about all kinds of things. Therefore, we need to look around and see what is it that has changed. And I want to mention just 3 things which we have to take account of. Thing number 1 is clearly that the geopolitics of the world has changed. We are in a difficult geopolitical position. We have not happy relations for a long time with Pakistan. as long as Pakistan was the only, we had to deal only with Pakistan, I think our military capacity to deal with them is very strong. We cannot, how to deal with them promoting terrorism is a separate issue, but it's not nothing to do with defense. That's a problem, whoever's handling it has to handle it. But today on the military side, Pakistan is hand in glove with China. And the Chinese military is much stronger than ours, and there should be no doubt in anybody's mind on that. And the problem really is therefore that they can use Pakistan as an excuse to provoke a military escalation with India. And if such a thing were to happen, we have to be clear that we're not just dealing with the Chinese, with the Pakistanis, we're dealing with Pakistan plus China. And one thing is totally clear from that, we have to modernize our military and we have to spend more. So in terms of expenditure, the budget is just about to be announced. I have no idea what it contains. And it doesn't matter what this one contains, these things take time. But over the next 5 years, we probably have to add about 1% of GDP to the defense budget. And let me say, everybody else is doing it. That's what the Europeans are doing, that's what other countries do. The Chinese spend much more than us anyway. So, we have to wake up. And particularly if we want to play the role that we want to play, protecting ourselves from anyone playing mischief, let's say in the Indian Ocean, we need a hugely more efficient and well-equipped Navy to do that. And naval strength is not just recruiting a lot of people and making them do drills. It's high technology, takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of time to build ships, etc., etc. So one area is the geopolitics is such that we will not be able to do what we were able to do in 1991, which is to maintain defense expenditure as a percent of GDP at a low level. Second, very major question is, what is happening to the world of trade? In 1991, anyone looking at the world would have said that, look, in the post-Second World War period, the growth of trade and the integration of the world into a global trading system with internationally accepted rules of trade have been very good for those who are able to benefit from it, and therefore we should also liberalize and open up, which we did. Maybe we didn't do enough, but we did. Today, the truth is we don't know what the global trading system is going to be. The Americans want to weaponize tariffs. Many other people want to close their markets. The most successful economy in the last 20 years has been China. They are a very large part of global trade now. And so normally you would think that if the economy is succeeding, you should be open to trading with them, because they will obviously have lots that you want to buy, but then they should be able to buy things from us. And that requires a kind of two-way relationship. But we have geopolitical problems with China, so that's a little questionable. So actually on the trade front, there are really two views I think that one can take. View number one is that, look, the Americans are being a bit unreasonable, but maybe that's due to President Trump's own preoccupations. He won't be there 3 years later, and probably by then the Americans will become reasonable. The rest of the world is not behaving like America. They want integration, they want a rules-based order, and that's why I think we did the right thing by signing an FTA with UK. We are working towards an FTA with Europe. I hope that comes through. Everybody says it's going to happen. And I think then the other side of that coin is you have to make up your mind. Is it correct that we should sign as many FTAs as possible, but keeping US aside because the US doesn't want to do it, and also keeping China a little bit aside because we're not sure that our industry is willing to do an FTA with China, but everybody else ought to have FTAs. That's one view. Remember, if you have an FTA with everyone else, it means you want the markets to be open, going to lower tariffs, this, that, and the other. The other view is that no, the country that has succeeded most is China. They've built invisible walls around themselves, and they've done tremendously well. And if we want to do well, we should close down. Close export, close down our trading system, look inwards, and try to develop our own strength. you can make a very plausible speech either way. I'll tell you what my view is. I think we should remain open. But I won't go into that. If you want to ask questions, you can. But that's one of the biggest things that you need to work out. What are the merits of those who say we should remain open? And what are the merits of those who say, no, we should set up tariff laws around India? That's a big issue. Third, two more things and then I'll stop. I'm not going to go into that in detail. The third important thing is technology. See, all of this could have happened in a world in which technology was stationary, or at least not changing very much. That's not the case. Technology is changing at a rate which is absolutely phenomenal. And the change is really AI. I mean, we've had series of changes in the digital economy, the internet, and all very important. But AI is truly a foundational change. I mean, these buzzwords you've heard before, but what it basically means is that AI will force people everywhere to do things differently. So in a way, it is the kind of technology that leads to creative destruction. If you're going to succeed in a world dominated by AI, then any firm that is moderately modern and is integrating with the global economy must rethink a lot of what it does to see how it can fit AI into the system. I think we are getting too much focused in the public debate today on whether we are leaders of AI. What is the definition of leaders of AI? There are two possible definitions. One is that, look, we are the ones leading the AI revolution in the sense that we are the ones who are going to produce the next large language model which people are going to use. I mean, that requires hundreds of billions of dollars and so on and so on. The other is, look, lots of people are producing these models. What we want to do is we want to use these models to increase our productivity. So you could envisage a situation where India is not a leader in the world of AI in the sense of producing something that is better than DeepSeek or producing something that is better than ChatGPT or Grok or Gemini. But India is a leader in the sense that the percentage of companies in India that have integrated AI into their normal work is very high. And at the moment, I think we are not leaders in either. It's not likely that we can become leaders pushing the frontier of AI because that requires a degree of, it's not just human talent, it requires a degree of both resources and institutional capability. Hopefully over 20 years we'll develop it, but you're not going to see that in the short run. On the other hand, if we set ourselves the target that, look, if you were to rank all developing countries, Indonesia, Turkey, make a list of the top 10. And you ask yourself, how many of the companies in these countries are actually using AI? It doesn't matter whether the AI is made in India. Using AI in their normal function. And if we are high on that list, then we are high in the penetration of AI. And that is a big question that we have to address. Now remember, if you accept that we should, then I think you have to also accept that there will be a significant amount of job loss in certain segments. Actually, what will happen is you will need new kinds of labor to deal with AI, but you lose a lot of labor which will become redundant. And I think this links back to the other question of egalitarian nature of growth. In other words, at 8%, some people would say that if you want to go from 6.5% to 9% or 8% in the next 10 years, then one of the technology changes that will make it possible is actually bringing in technology, meaning AI. But the other side of the coin is that if you do bring in AI, then in terms of employment generation, you'll be generating a certain kind of employment, and indeed you need to train people for that, but you won't be generating the same amount of employment for. So independent of these things, the change in climate is not favorable to high growth in India. It will actually lower our growth rates. I mean, lots of studies have been done, it's not just Even pure temperature increase leads to a loss of labor productivity. You may not feel that if you're sitting in air-conditioned rooms with fans and all the rest of it, but you're working out in the field. If the temperature is 3 degrees higher, your productivity goes down. You need to rest more, etc., etc. Apart from that, I mean, two things will happen. If the climate change continues, then we know that rainfall will become much more concentrated. You may get the same amount of rainfall, but it will be concentrated in a fewer number of days. You'll get many more periods of drought and many more periods of excess rain. And the problem with excess rain is that you don't conserve the water. I mean, it's difficult for the water. The water doesn't have the time to actually sink into the aquifer, it just flows out into the sea. Now, in order to correct that, you need large investments in afforestation, basically change the nature of the river basin so that whatever rain falls, more of it is absorbed in the ground and less of it goes into the river. Otherwise, you just get periodic floods and all the fresh water goes out into the sea. And that is going to cost money. So, you know, defense is going to be one thing that's going to demand more money. The investments needed to cope with climate change is going to demand more money. The investment needed to cope with technology change as well as the reduction in agricultural productivity is going to require more money. And of course, health and education have long been, and if you say the same thing for education, they'll also say yes. Let me say, by the way, that spending money doesn't guarantee that it's well spent. That's the second issue. But you do need to have the money to spend it. Now, if you add up all these demands, we're talking about almost 5%. I listed 5% of GDP, which needs to be spent in all these different things. In a world in which we are dependent on foreign investment and our savings rate is not high enough to finance high levels of investment, it matters how the rest of the world thinks whether you're well managed or not. With the slightest kind of sense of being ill managed, money starts flowing out. You're seeing that right now, which is why the rupee is weak. So I think the key thing that people look at internationally is the fiscal deficit. It's not the only thing that determines growth. Many other things determine growth. But most people think that if the fiscal deficit is deteriorating, then whatever the long-term problem, the short-term problem will overwhelm you. So I think any government would have to look very hard to make sure that it lives up to the promises it has made of fiscal responsibility. To do that and at the same time plan for 5% more of GDP as expenditure means that if you want to reduce the fiscal deficit, let's say by 2 percentage points of GDP, and you want to increase the expenditure by 5 percentage points of GDP, you're talking about a turnaround of 7 percentage points. That has to be either your revenues will increase by that much as a percent of GDP above the normal, or you're going to cut expenditure. In other words, get rid of some of the freebies schemes that we have. So, you know, I don't think the politics is focusing on this at all. Because we're just going year by year and we carry on. But that is going to be a huge challenge. How do we manage it? So, I have no idea whether the finance minister in her budget speech will focus on this. It can't be solved in 1 year. It cannot be, nobody can produce a budget which takes care of all these problems. But you know, if you give the signal that we're aware of these problems and we're going to handle it, then you create a sort of a climate of opinion in which these things can get sorted out. So you know, Viksit Bharat can be reduced to 2 and 3% more of GDP growth, more public goods, which also means this health and education expenditure, more equal distribution, which includes taking care of the effect of new technology on employment. It also includes taking care of the negative effect of climate change on agriculture. And how to do all that is not just money. I think we have to change the way we do many things, and also change the policy structures within which we work. So that is much longer. That's not a one lecture. That calls for 10 different lectures in each of these sectors. But I'm just sketching out for you the areas. So with those words, let me thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to respond to any questions that you may have. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a pleasure to hear your views and ideas on the topic. We can now proceed with audience questions.
क्वेश्चन करेगा सर वीडियो लिया
I think you better call out another
question.
Morning, sir. Thank you so much for gracing us at this event and for your address. So my question would be, you talked about how LPG drove growth and how right now in order to achieve our dream of Viksit Bharat, we need to drive growth up to 8%. So my question is, should we go back and follow our practices of liberalization that we used to, or should we take a newer policy path of resilience and self-sufficiency, as our Prime Minister often talks about 𝗦𝗶𝗵𝗵. So according to you, what is a better approach that India should take in order to achieve our dream of Viksit Bharat?
Well, I mean, of course, as Bharat is aspirational, which really means that people want to become Viksit, which really means what do you have to do. So, I mean, I've sketched out for you a large area. I'm not in a position to actually give you answers, but these are the choices you have to make. But if you ask me roughly, I think we should be open rather than closed. So I'm against the notion that we should protect industry. I'm in favor of making it competitive, exposing it to competition, and supporting them to achieve what they need to do. That's very important. Merely exposing them is no good. I'm in favor of doing more for public goods delivery, which will take care of education. I mean, education is not just a consumer good. It's something that feeds into your own ability to grow. Kids that are going to school today will be entering the labor force as we approach Viksit Bharat. Now, at the moment, if you look at the results of ASR, the survey of rural India, they say that half the kids in grade 4 cannot read the text meant for grade 2. Now, I mean, if AI is taking over and data analytics if you're running a country where half the kids cannot do the sort of maths and reading that is required at a level 3 years younger, there's no way that we're going to do well. And this is not something the central government can tackle. This has to be tackled at the state level. So I think much more of our analysis, I would be very happy if more people were to say, of all the states of India, these are the states that are capable of getting to Viksit Bharat, and these are the states that are failing. I've not seen that kind of analysis, because actually this picture that the normal approach is that the southern states are much better than the northern states. That is true for health, infant mortality, that kind of stuff. But on this education thing, all the states are equally bad. And I mean, even Tamil Nadu, which normally we think of as a high-skilled state, the ASR results do not suggest that Tamil Nadu is actually all that good. So what do we do? And of course, if you want to spend money, you have to raise money. I'm in favor of selling off all the public sector. If you want a controversial thing, here's a good one. I mean, there are any number. When I say all, you don't have to. Of the 400 or so units, maybe you can keep 5. Many committees have looked at it in the last 20 years. I'm not aware of a single government in the last 20 years which has said, no, we mustn't privatize. They've all said we must privatize, but none of them do so. So, when you meet your MP the next day, please ask him what his view is. I don't know, whichever party. Does he agree with this or no? And I think, frankly, the system that we have, in the political level, this is not thrown up as an issue. Nobody will have a manifesto which says we're going to privatize the public sector. Manifesto will always be, we'll have more schemes for women, more schemes for scheduled castes, more schemes for OBC, more schemes for every caste that you can think of. It will not take any of these tough decisions. And when you talk about these schemes, nobody will say, and this is how we're going to balance the budget. I mean, how are these new schemes? How are you going to balance the budget? That's just not being talked about.
Thank you so much for your answer, sir.
We can take one more question.
First of all, thank you, sir, for such an insightful session, and it is truly an honor to have a conversation with you face to face. So, one of the major problems that we as an economy are facing in the recent budgets is the abysmally small investment in the capital expenditure and the capacity building. We know that capacity building is extremely important for an economy because the ancillary and supporting industries also get an impetus. What, according to you, is the actual problem in it? Is it the red tape, is the bureaucracy, or is the lack of willingness on the part of the government to spend on the capacity building? Because as I see it, there is no dearth of opportunities for capacity building. We have FDIs coming in, and we have a lot of, we are a developing country, so we have a lot of need for flyovers, expressways, and ports. So what actually is the problem?
No, it's good, a very good question. Let me just make, I can't give you a comprehensive answer to it, because one needs to know much more. And from the outside, I'm not entirely sure, but one or two things. First of all, I agree with you that we need more investment. The gross fixed capital to investment to GDP is about 30%. At one time, about 7-8 years ago, it was 34%. So it has actually gone down. It is not that it is low, it has gone down. It was rising, then it has gone down. And very often people say, oh, capital investment has gone down, government should invest more. Now ask yourself the question, if you want a private sector-led development, are you solving the problem by saying the private sector is not investing? Let the government invest. To the extent to which the government is investing in infrastructure, that's good. Because infrastructure will make life easier for the private sector. But for God's sake, don't encourage the government to invest in things which the private sector can invest in. It's much better for them to ask, why is they not investing? And I think that is the real question that should be asked. In my view, given that we are the second fastest growing, we are the fastest growing emerging market economy, we have what we think is a very dynamic private sector, is not investing. Why? Since it's not my job to work these things out, but I think this is a legitimate question. But don't be fooled by somebody saying private sector is not investment, we are going to invest.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir, for answering all our queries. I would like to express my gratitude to our esteemed keynote speaker for gracing us with his presence, taking valuable time out of his busy schedule and sharing his experiences and opinions with us today. It was truly an honor for us. Now, Nomics, the Analytics and Economics Club of DBE would like to present Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, sir, and our respected faculty members with a small token of appreciation.